And I would like to introduce this discussion in such a way. When you start thinking about the whole process, one of the first questions is, who will initiate it? And Graham has just described several options from Ireland, France, and United Kingdom. And what would be the best option for Estonia? Should it be the president? Should it be the prime minister? Should it be the minister of environment? Should it be the parliament? Should it be parliamentary committees? Or perhaps it should be the group of citizens who start the process independently. The situation that we have in Poland is that when you organize citizens' assembly on the local level, you need to have a law for it in most cases. So that's why the citizens' assemblies in Poland are already embedded into local law. And for example, in the city of Gdańsk, and the same would be for the city of Krakow, let's say, or Wrocław or Poznań, the citizens' assembly can be initiated on the local level by the city council, by the mayor, or the group of citizens can write a petition to the mayor. And in the city of Gdańsk and Poznań, if the number of signatures collected by citizens reaches a certain level, in Gdańsk it is 5,000, in Poznań I think it is, I believe it is 2,000, then the mayor cannot refuse. So we have two cities where citizens can initiate the whole process. Nevertheless, such a law does not exist on the national level. So we had recently an experience from Germany, where there was a citizens' assembly organized independently. And also there was one organized in Northern Ireland. So it is possible for people to just come up and say, okay, let's organize a citizens' assembly. But there's a question, how much power will it have? So I would like, Dimitri, I would like to ask you to introduce the questions for the first discussions in the breakout rooms.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marcin. I'm going to get to that. I just wanted to myself ask you one or two questions to you and Graham. You talked about civic lottery and how this could guarantee a diverse panel and how this could get on board people that normally do not participate in such debates. Which recommendations would you give Estonia in order to captivate, to get these people that will receive or a letter, as you said, Graham, or a door-to-door visit, or maybe a phone call. These people that would love to participate, but that straight away think, oh my God, I would like that, but I really don't think I have the capacities or the knowledge to participate in such an important debate. In my work, I've seen this quite a lot. And so in 2 minutes, please, maybe Graham first, what would you recommend in the letter, in the phone call, or in the door-to-door process in order to captivate and convince these people that their voice has got to be heard too?
So I think we found two things have helped make it a success. One is that this is an invitation from a significant political figure, whether it's parliamentary or presidential or government figures, that actually it's seen as something which is going to have impact. So first of all, that people realize that they're being asked to do something serious. And the second is stressing really clearly in the communication that this is a process involving ordinary people like themselves, everyday people, and that hearing everyday people's voices is really critical. So it's those two things. One is to make it clear that it's a significant process and is going to be taken seriously, and the second is that this is actually designed to bring people like you, everyday people, into this process, and only through doing that will it work.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Marcin, 30 seconds.
Sure, yes. I will show you later on the invitations that we use in Poland, in the city of Wrocław. Definitely, I agree that there is this like a comparison. It should look like an invitation for the royal wedding. So it should be really significant. And I agree also about the impact, which is crucial. And what we have also used the last time in the city of Wrocław, we used there was a one sheet of paper with frequently asked questions to explain everything, like the key questions that people can have about the process, so it's clear from the very beginning. But as I also understand that in Estonia you could send out the emails, so it would be the fourth option, the one that they already use in Copenhagen.
Okay, so a good-looking email also as a
Yes.
royal wedding. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Marcin. So the next step now, Marcin introduced one of the blocks, the building blocks for this future climate assembly, and that was the mandate. Graham talked about it too. So basically the mandate, who is going to, so what are we going to do it for? So now I'm going to have this breakout session where you're going to be all sent into different groups. We're going to try to keep the groups even, and to try to keep the Estonians for this time, only this time, the Estonians was Estonians, and the others, the international sphere, among them. You'll understand why later on, but you're going to be asked two main questions, and I'll ask Tila maybe to put them into the chat, like that people can come back to them. The first question is, who should ideally initiate the process in your country? Okay, who should, so in Estonia, in this case, initiate the process? As Marcin said, it can be the parliament, it can be the government, or should we have something from the civil society? The second question is there added value in an independently organized citizen assembly? So if it is totally independently organized without having the direct coordination and organization from a political body. So these are the two questions I'm going to ask you to talk about. As I said, you're going to be for 10 minutes in a breakout session. And at the end of the 10 minutes, I will ask one representative of each of the breakout sessions to share what they came up with. First, I will give the floor to the Estonian groups, and I want to hear what they think is best for Estonia. And then I will ask the international groups to maybe interact with those proposals from the Estonians and see how what they think about and how they can help Estonians, the Estonian group, to decide on this topic. Okay, so welcome back to this plenary. Thank you. I would like to, I don't know if you were aware of the group number you had, but I know that the group 1 and the group 5 were the Estonian groups. I would like to hear about them first and ask the Estonian groups if they can first share in a minute what went on in their group and how were they able to answer that question, and if not, what were the nots not enabling you to answer that question? Who would like to take the floor? Please put your hand up for the group 1 of Estonians. I can see Tila, but I mean, Tila, do you want to talk for one of the first group, or?
I can do that. Yeah, okay. This 10 minutes went extremely fast, and I sensed that we were just beginning to brainstorm. But we were first kind of distinguishing between the initiator and the receiver of these recommendations. They don't have to be the same. And the beauty of the game probably is that they're not the same. Although the receiver of the recommendations of the Climate Assembly has to be known before launching it. It's not possible to launch it without, because then people are not that motivated to it's another, draft consultation process or something similar. And then we defined some possible receivers. We think they should come in Estonian context from the action world, meaning the government or the local government. And it seemed that on local level, there could be potential to start kind of like series of climate assemblies, because the local level is more, it's easier to scale up there or kind of make the spillover effect, start with one and then everybody is not able to stay behind, so they have to join or something like that. And another possibility we had in our group also, the representative from Estonia in the European Climate Mission, so that would also be as an initiator. But we discussed that in Estonian context, the more kind of shared the responsibility is, the less like one person, like the president of Estonia or just the parliament, the more there are these actors involved, or the better it is, because then it's like everyone's process. But it can be also a danger, I guess. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Tila. For the group 2 of Estonian, so it was group 5, it said, who would like to take the floor? From the other group where Tila was not then? Anyone? I can't see anybody putting their hands up.
I can.
Okay, Hila, thank you.
It's rather funny because we ended up with absolutely the opposite proposals than Taylor's group. So we
Hila, you broke up. I think you broke up for everybody. If you can just start again from the beginning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in stark contrast to what Taylor's group proposed, we left out both Parliament and the President, for they do not have the action possibilities and levers to actually start or launch the process to actually generate impact. So we ended up, first we talked about only the Minister and Ministry of Environment, but then we added to it the Ministry of Economic Affairs as well, because we can't deal with them without the energy and perhaps transport issues that they cover. And we excluded the local government just for the sheer reason that, again, they don't have, they have needs and they have the problem, but they don't have instrument for solutions. Sorry, so they are not in direct contact with the national roadmap that the government has to prepare. But the government does have a need to actually prepare the fair transition roadmap, and the government can pull together the forces to also present it to the European Commission. So they have actually already the kind of implication that they need some action, and it doesn't matter that there are already many actors in Estonia who are doing something towards the solution, because there can be different aspects and angles targeted and addressed by the assembly method, and then all brainstorms and workshops and discussions that take place, they will be there, and hopefully they will target some other or different angles, but even if not, it's not a huge problem.
Okay, thank you, Hila. I must ask you to forgive me to the pronunciation of all your names. I'm not so sure about that.
That was absolutely correct. Thank you.
Okay, good. So I would like to ask maybe someone from the international scene to a bit pop in maybe here and say, you know, we've had two contradictory findings from the two Estonian groups. How could we help them to bring this debate forwards? Does anyone want to pop in here for 1 minute? I can't see. I've got different screens to see if anyone. Oh yes, Jamie, off you go.
So I don't know if I really bridged the thing. We had different approaches, I guess, depending on the countries. So we talked about Scotland with the power. I guess we've got an example in process. So we talked about that it comes from Parliament in Scotland, but that the recommendations from the Assembly then has to go to the Scottish Government, who then have to respond to that. So I guess you get both of those areas in. We then talked about whether citizens could, a citizens-initiated assembly would work. I think we had different views. So I think in Poland, I guess there's a legal framework that kind of forces those in power to kind of consider the recommendations seriously. And therefore kind of a more citizens-initiated approach worked quite well. Whereas in, I think, Latvia and Lithuania, people were less sure about that kind of citizens approach. The other thing that I think we talked about was the resources of these different approaches, that kind of a government or parliament approach potentially has more resources than a citizens approach. And I think that I think an assembly is quite an expensive process to go through. I think the things like public engagement are quite important aspects of it to kind of get that legitimacy within the population. And therefore you need quite significant funding and capability to do those things for it to be kind of quite an effective process.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Thank you. Anyone that wants to, I'll take one more person that wants to pop in. I can't see any hands up. That's totally okay. So good. So we're going to move on to choosing the topic. So which topic of climate change, vast issue, do we want to talk about? As Graham talked about, in France, they presented, as Graham presented a bit earlier, in France, they got several topics with 5 different groups. Is that which are the topics in the different groups? So what do we really want to tackle? I would like to give the floor first to Marcin for a couple of minutes, Graham, and then Thilo, who would like to finish on this, giving the Estonian perspective. Marcin.
Dimitri, would it be okay if I just briefly comment on the conclusions from the groups?
Of course, go ahead.
Just very briefly, because like my thinking about Poland, who would be the best person to sign the letter to the participants? Who would that be? And definitely in Polish context, that would be the Prime Minister. Why? Because it's the person who has got the most power. Well, definitely we have the head of the Law and Justice Party, who is like an informal head of everything. But from the official perspective and how the system is designed in Poland, it is the Prime Minister who holds the most power. And it is them who would be then responsible for implementing the recommendations. They can present the new changes in regulations in the form of bills and so on. So definitely I would like in Poland to be the Prime Minister to be the one who starts the process. It can be the president, fine, but then the recommendations will go to the government anyway. And I like the comment that Thilo made, that it is good for everyone to come together to initiate the whole process. And this is exactly what I will describe in a minute. So there is also one question I think that it would be nice to consider, and that is actually, the question is, to have a bill or not to have a bill? What does it mean? Do you need to change the law to hold the Citizens' Assembly? This is something worth considering just before going to the topics and the whole other details. Because you might want to have some basic legal framework, for example, to allow you to use personal data of people to randomly select them to receive invitations. In Poland, it would be much better to have it written explicitly in the law so that there is no debate between the lawyers. Is it possible according to GDPR rules or not? So I'm for the bill, which includes some basic like elements of the Citizens' Assembly, perhaps also like the privacy of members of the Citizens' Assembly, that they don't speak with the advocates with the lobbyists, basically. So with regards to the question, there are some criteria that I have identified. And definitely the first one, how important is this? If you have a wide range of topics, in Poland, this could be whether or not there should be a nuclear power plant constructed by the government. When or if should we close, actually if it's not a question, when should we close the coal mines? And other possible questions, how fast should be the transition to renewable energy or to zero carbon society? There is a wide range of topics, and some of them are more important and like urgent. And so definitely I would think about the importance of the topic. Then there is the scope. If the My thinking is like this: how many days for learning phase do you need to cover everything so that participants know as much as possible? So that the participants know everything that is needed to make a decision which will be well informed. So if the topic is too broad, then there is like a huge number of learning days, and it might be too much for people. So choosing specific topics is important. Graham mentioned the Irish example. What can we do to make Ireland a climate leader? Sounds nice for public relations reasons, but it would be much better to ask, how can we reduce greenhouse gas emissions from animal farming? That would be much more specific. And also, since we are inviting the citizens, there is this aspect of whether or not the topic is attractive to people. If it's too technical, it may not be suitable for a climate assembly. And also, since the citizens' assemblies in most countries are not in the law, actually in all countries are not in the law yet for the national level, then is there an agreement from the government or the parliament to implement recommendations with regards to this particular topic? Because, for example, we already know from the discussions with the people on the, like mayors on the local level, that there are some topics they don't want to touch. For example, they may be very expensive to implement, and they say, oh, we can sense what people will say, let's not do it because we will not implement it anyway. So for practical reason, even the topic might be very important. If there is no willingness to implement the recommendations, I would suggest skipping it, because then people will be just frustrated that nothing happened. So these are the basic criteria that I have identified, like things to think over when you are selecting the topic.
Okay, thank you, Marcin. Thank you, Marcin. Graham, do you want to jump in there? Maybe react also on this aspect of the topic being large, or then going to something really precise that I think could help us think about the Estonian cases.
Yeah, I think this is a real challenge. I think there are virtues on both sides. I understand Marcin's idea of maybe the thing about climate. Maybe we shouldn't think about a climate assembly, but climate assemblies that look at specific topics which are particularly pertinent at that moment in time in order to deal. So it might be about energy transition, it might be about agriculture, it might be about a particular question in some other area of policy. So I think they have value. I also see value in asking citizens to take on the challenge of how do we reduce greenhouse gases by a particular time, particularly in those countries that have made those sorts of commitments, and most have made commitments in relation to Paris. And that is interesting because that then allows citizens to trade off different options in terms of trying to think through what should take priority, which, because there are knock-on effects of one policy area onto another. If you're going to do that latter, then you really do need to give significant time, and it's a bigger design challenge. But I think it is possible. So those are my thoughts. Is that it's much more manageable to look at a single issue, but climate change, given its complexity, does have these trade-offs, and I think it's interesting to see what kind of trade-offs citizens will make.
Okay. Has anyone got a question? Doreen, I see your hand up.
For me, I think there's a couple of things in this. One is that we don't necessarily need to see a climate assembly as the only way that people will be involved in this. It feels to me as if we're trying to cram everything into one event. And I would like, and I think climate change in particular is an issue where we have to deal with it across our society in a variety of ways. And therefore we need a whole institutionalized way of asking that question with citizens. So we need to do it thematically, we need to do it geographically. So just transition in Aberdeen is going to be very different to just transition in Glasgow, or indeed London or Wales. And we should use the initial citizen assembly to be able to identify that this is a question that needs much more than one go at it. And particularly with this, where it is absolutely core to the lives people will lead. One of the things that we want to do is use that initial question to be able to elicit an answer around how do citizens properly get involved in the implementation in their own area, in their own industry, in whatever aspect. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant.
Okay, thanks, Doreen. So taking the assembly, the climate assembly, to launch a broader process of participation. Does anyone want to jump in now? I can't, I'm looking at my screen. I see Iago hasn't spoken yet. Iago, floor's yours.
Yes, well, this is about the topics. I think Marcin insight about not too complex is fine, but I think it's also interesting to choose topics that are related with decisions that will affect the everyday people lives. No, for example, how consumption works. No, regarding, for example, buying food, but also buying fuel for your cars. How you're gonna have to change your car in the future, and who is gonna pay if you're gonna pay if you need to change your car and go into an electric car. Who is gonna pay to this transition, also food transition? No, there are a lot of transition related with consumption that are going to affect everyday citizens, and they think is more relevant if they work on that kind of decisions, because they will be able to do this kind of social justice trade-off.
Thank you, Iago. Anybody else from the participants? I can't see any other. Jamie, quickly.
I think one of the things I've been thinking about, which is what the other climate assemblies have done, is that they have split their assemblies into different themes, and different groups have considered those. And I've been wondering whether that's the right way to go or whether it's not. I guess thinking about yes, a practical consideration to cover the amount of content, you kind of need to split those groups. But then there is something about the members losing that overall consideration of the issue. And I guess thinking about more systematic issues that need to be addressed to tackle climate change. And without the whole membership doing all of those different themes, you kind of lose a bit of that. And therefore they might not necessarily be able to consider kind of those cross-cutting issues, I guess. So I think that links with the scope is how do you balance that and that division of the members potentially that I think a lot of the climate assemblies are going down.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Graham, maybe you want to jump in there. I mean, the pros and the cons about splitting up these assemblies into different subjects, and how maybe, you know, we can lose the broader picture when we do have different groups.
So there's a couple of advantages and disadvantages. I think one of the advantages here is that it's actually quite hard to work with a group of 100 people over, you know, all working at exactly the same time on exactly the same topic. I mean, a big room is challenging to work with. So in some ways, actually breaking it into these smaller groups actually has a certain effectiveness to it. And I think that the key to responding to Jamie's issue is about how these groups connect with each other. And if they're not talking to each other, I think that's problematic. So if you're working in your silo and that you don't then have those kind of conversations across the groups about what it is that you've been learning and discussing, I think then you do create some problems. I think certainly in France, the members actually decided that they needed to have a cross-cutting group that would actually look at issues which related to them. So they recognized that problem. So for me, that's a design issue about how we do that. If you want to get through the kinds of the level of material that you need to get through, and you want to think about transition to zero carbon by a particular time, then I think the only way of doing it is breaking up in those ways. Otherwise, you're going to have an incredibly long process.
Okay, thank you. Marcin, you wanted to jump into?
From my perspective, definitely, the Citizens' Assembly should not cover everything, should not deal with all aspects of climate change. This is definitely like too much. The best approach that I have identified for the local level, which can be scaled up to the national level, goes like this. First, you start with a zero carbon strategy for your country or for your area. And this is done actually in the county of Devon. They have started with this creation of a plan of how to reach the zero emissions. And then once you work on this with a group of NGOs, institutions, diverse stakeholders, and definitely civil servants and other local authorities involved, you will find the issues which are important and controversial. So you don't need to go through everything. You just choose the topics which are important and controversial that the group of experts and stakeholders was not able to solve. To give another concrete example, the city of Krakow currently is working on a plan of zero emission Krakow 2030, and definitely they will find some issues, and only those issues could go to the Citizens' Assembly, because there is no point in discussing things where there is an agreement between stakeholders, civil servants. Yes, we should go in that direction. When it's obvious, it's not a good topic for the Citizens' Assembly because it's a waste of time. So, and I forgot actually to show you the two slides, which are kind of important. And the first one would be from the city of Wrocław, which is the workshop to select the topic. We have organized it like 2 months ago, something like this, and it worked out very well. The initial topic was suggested by the local city hall, and it was criticized by local activists. And we realized as a group of coordinators that there should be an opportunity for people to come together and look at this topic once again, because there is no agreement around it. So we have organized a special workshop. We went there, like I was there in person, because I thought it was so important. And actually there were 5 directors of departments from the city hall attending the workshop. And as I heard, it didn't happen any time in the history of the city of Wrocław that so many directors of the departments attended. And actually the atmosphere was very good. And the method that we used is called KJ. It looks like this. People suggest give their choices, the proposals. People write on the sheets of papers the proposals. This is the first step. The second step is to group them. The third step is to give the names to those groups. And the fourth step is to vote, which one is the most important. And the method works very well, and it helped to create an agreement. The topic for the Citizens' Assembly in Wrocław was changed, and people were happy about it. It worked. All right.
Thank you, Marcin. So,
which was the topic? Can you share which was the topic?
Oh, yes. Okay, so the topic was, the initial topic suggested by the City Hall was how to improve transportation in Wrocław, and there were subtopics, concrete subtopics. One was about connecting the peripheral districts of Wrocław with the center. Should it be a tramway or a bus? And the second topic from the City Hall vision was how to create those zero emission zones in the city. But the activists said that it doesn't solve anything, that these are not like the key issues for the transportation in Wrocław. The conclusion of the workshop was that actually the topic which should be looked at is how to reduce the number of cars running around Wrocław. So the outcome of the process, which was agreed by the City Hall, was to introduce to broaden the number of options with regards to how to reduce the cars on the streets in terms of zoning, like pedestrian zoning, not just zero emission zoning, but also low emission zoning, pedestrian zones, and so on. So it was broader. And in the very title, there was climate protection mentioned. So the local activists from the Extension Rebellion group, they wanted to include this aspect in the title of the Citizens Assembly, so that and there was even a demonstration in front of the building where the workshop was held. There were people laying down on the street in black plastic bags with the words that climate catastrophe, something like this. But anyway, the outcome of the process was that the climate aspect would be introduced in this in the learning phase, and that's why it was eventually a climate assembly.
Okay, thank you, Marcin. So if I summarize about the topic, it's better to have a specific topic or specific topics and not go too large. Controversial topics are the best because those are the ones that politicians can't really solve. So putting it to the citizens' participation process and deliberation can help. Having a transversal group that overlooks the different topics, if we do have different topics, is something, it's an added value. And finally, having a workshop that could choose the topic is also something that you in Estonia could think about in order to choose the topic. I'd like to give the floor now to Tila, because topics and which topics have already been discussed in Estonia, and she's going to give you a little overview about what that is. I've seen your hand up. I'll give you the floor a bit later, okay?
Yeah. Thank you, Dimitri. We mapped the possible topics for Estonian Climate Assembly with a small group of people just a week ago. There were 6-7-ish people from environmental organizations, change agents, and people that had been involved in Estonian citizen assemblies or deliberation processes before. But the focus was more exactly that if we take climate assembly or citizen assembly as a way to accelerate change and also to kind of help solve the politically toxic problems, that we first forgot about the climate assembly as a method and then just mapped like, okay, what are these kind of topics in Estonia out of everything? And, you know, just a remark, there are a lot of things going on in the climate and environmental things or actions needed to be taken anyway. You know, ministries do their work and the government does and all that. But what kind of emerged from the Estonian topics, and everybody has the access to that table that has the long explanation of those possible topics. But what emerged quite strongly was the energy as the biggest polluter now. We are producing our energy from oil shale as a majority energy source, and then the just transformation process that is taking place, but you know, without any plan from the government and with quite much uncertainty as well. But we are not deciding the topic in this workshop. Just to make clear, these are just, let's call it as an initial mapping of the possible topics for Estonia. But we also mapped like forest, like how to stop the intensifying forestry business, how to prevent mining phosphorite and other minerals that has its history in Estonia, how to become climate neutral faster by 2035, not 2050. That's the official goal for Estonian government, and several more topics. So this is just as an input for this workshop and for our later work in Estonia. Thanks.
Thank you, Tila. Well, for you to all have a quite good look at these topics, we're going to do a little survey. Michael is going to send this survey. It's going to appear on your screen, and you will have the different topics that Tila has already made come out from this first workshop that happened a week ago. So this is just for us and Tila and the Estonians to have an idea. So it's nothing binding, but we'd just like to have a little idea on, you know, what do you think? you've got quite some topics, and we asked you to choose maximum 2. You actually can choose all of them if you like, technically, but we'll ask you just to choose 2 in order for us to kind of have a good look. So, Michael, can you please send us the poll? And I'll give you the floor, Tilo, just in 1 minute, please. How do you react to that first poll? Is that something surprising for you? So the energy comes in first. Do you, one minute on how you want to react to that?
Well, it's great. Yeah, climate as the kind of covering topic, and then energy, exiting oil shale and entering just transformation to renewable energies. Yeah, but as again, this was just you know, a small game. This is not doesn't mean that now we are starting the process. So I really like what was done in Poland with the working group and workshop, actually to identify the topic. But just as a comment for Estonian government, they would probably buy this energy and just transformation really well, because they are struggling with that. And this has been going on for like 20 years and without any success. So in that sense, this is quite an attractive topic.
Okay, well, controversial topic as
yeah,
Marcin
controversial, and in PR-wise also quite attractive.
Great. Graham, you wanted to jump in, and I see Doreen too. Anybody else? Okay, I'll give the floor to Graham and then Doreen, and then we'll have a break.
So I think it's very interesting that energy is coming out as an issue, and I think that's really interesting. There is, and I know this isn't supposed to be the mandate, but that would be a problematic mandate that you've got there, because it's basically saying, how do we get rid of oil and move to renewables? It's not really giving the citizens a chance to think about things like reducing, which is the third question, reducing energy consumption as a way of moving forward. So I think this is really interesting, that if you were going to do it around energy, that's one of those ones where actually you do need a variety of different different policies are in play. But I think it's a really interesting way of, and it would be one which isn't just a simple, should we do this to that? There are a whole range of different scenarios there. But I think it's a really interesting area and really critical area.
Thank you, Graham. Doreen.
Mine's just a very quick question to Taylor. Is there anyone from Estonian government on this call?
Yes, there are several advisors from several ministries, like Martin Lauri from the Ministry of Interior Affairs, Ivan Sergeyev from the Ministry of Economic Affairs.
Brilliant.
Yes, and
that's a question.
I also invited someone from the Prime Minister's office, but I think she's not here because she's doing crisis communication.
The sole government person in these things that I just asked the question, you know.
We're all friends in a tiny Estonia, so
I know.